You are listening to the Mariam Kwanta Show on Salam Media. It is 12:44 on this Monday, the 1st of February, 2021. The coronavirus has been devastating to say the least, but there has been recent news from pharmaceutical companies indicating promising results from their clinical trials. With a vaccine just around the corner, many employers now face the prospect of deciding whether or not to have their employees get the COVID-19 vaccine. To tell us more whether employers rather can force employees to get vaccinated for COVID-19 is a lawyer, Magdalene Moonsamy. Assalamu alaikum, Magdalene.
Walaikum salam, Mariam. How are you?
All good, alhamdulillah, and yourself?
Oh, well, alhamdulillah.
All right.
Good to see you.
Likewise, except your camera is cutting half of your face.
I don't understand. I'm trying to make it work. Sorry. There.
All right. While you try that, let us talk about this whole vaccine thing. When it comes to getting tested for COVID and getting a vaccine, is an employer legally allowed to require employees to get the vaccine?
One of the things that is very interesting is that this is a constitutional issue.
Yes.
Because we don't have a proper policy in terms of the right of invasion of the bodies, the right to the body's privacy, etc., is a non-derogable right, like the right to religion and the right to life. However, in the Bill of Rights, along with non-derogable rights, are derogable rights. So what you have is a situation where if, for example, the safety or the security of another individual is then compromised because of the nature of the work, etc., that one is exposed to. So that becomes a conundrum. In principle, however, Mariam, it would be incorrect, and I think that the World Health Organization as well, with its so-called COVID passport, we now have been having varying streams or strains of the virus. And it would be an absolute abomination if we had to compel people to be vaccinated. The vaccines have been unconfirmed that it will be preventative measure for COVID. And remember, we have had a strain of the vaccine last year. We now have a second mutated strain, and the likelihood is that we'd have the third mutated. So which vaccine are you using to counter which strain, which could be the argument of the employee? So the one thing is the medical compatibility. In terms of law, in terms of medical health professionals would then have to provide that kind of guidance. And there's been much that has been written about the vaccine, etc., and whether this vaccine is in fact going to counter the second strain. Now, the other issue is that can you then force a person under the Bill of Rights? And to do such, to force one under the Bill of Rights, would be a breach of their constitutional right. And so there has to be then a reconsideration in respect of whether the right to being in a safe and secure environment then supersedes the right of in terms of the nature of the employment. So one would then have to make a case and reconsider how to place the argument in terms of a legislated form countering the Constitution itself, which is, I think, a major challenge and a major disadvantage that the country would face, because the vaccine, if for example, the argument is those who are frontliners, who are working with the medical, in medical hospitals, etc., what then happens, because they have been at the center of working with people who are in the phase of COVID, and what then happens if they have to fall within a compulsory duty to be vaccinated by their uh, 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 their employee, which would be the Department of Health, for example, if it's a public
Mm-hmm.
institution. That might be something that may have to be considered from the point of view of after careful consideration of the nature of the vaccine and the implications thereof. But if you are, for example, and this is what a lot of employers are now doing and saying, rather let your employees work at home. For
Mm.
those who can function from their homes, as opposed to being forced into being vaccinated, because we're not going to have vaccines for 52 million people, Mariam.
Yes.
So, um, and the expense at which those vaccines would then be coming at, I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
test itself is inaccessible to so
Mm.
many people. The expense at which the vaccine would be coming at would mean that those who are subsidized and forced to find themselves in a situation where they now naturally have to um, take the vaccine because they are frontline staff. Um, if that is the case, then that would have to be the Departments of Health's prerogative,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people have they say that, well, these are just speculations, but it would then have to be confirmed that this vaccine actually is preventative. It ensures that you are immune from
Yeah.
the virus, and that is, I think, where many people have got a sense of confirmation that it is not. It's just giving you a certain degree of some kind of an antibody, but not a immunity from the virus. And we're expecting a third strain. So one, I think there's a constitutional dilemma that employees will face, and that constitutional dilemma may mean that there are some employees who may voluntarily want to take the vaccine for their own purposes and say, um, we take the vaccine voluntarily, and then we are interfacing at this level, and they voluntarily do it. But
Mm-hmm.
where it comes to being forced, that is where employer human resource policy is going to struggle, because it's a constitutional matter. And employees have the prerogative not to have their bodies. If you recall, Mariam, at some point, there was forced saliva testing for HIV that were being done at various universities, especially historically disadvantaged universities in
Yes.
KZN. And that caused a huge um, uh, protest, because people were obviously in a situation where they were told that they are forced to do it as part of a university exercise or coming in as orientation. And that's how people were getting their numbers. And the stigma around the HIV virus, the HIV virus, then became such that people did not want to talk about it. Now we are in a situation where the COVID virus is it takes lives so suddenly, and even under those circumstances, if you had to look at a case of Woolworths, if I'm not mistaken, that there was a case of Woolworths where um, at some point people were being asked to be tested for HIV. And the court then said, no, this is a discrimination. It's
Mm.
discrimination against the individual. You are not obligated unless when there was a latter case that came. Now, this is where Section 34 of the Constitution becomes relevant, where if you had not informed your partner um, that you were involved with, that you were positive and you transmitted the disease, that's when we had the case of the attempted murder. That it was the court saw it, that this person had deliberately, with intention, knowing that they were HIV positive, placed their partner's life at risk by transmitting the disease and them becoming infected with the virus.
Mm-hmm. Magdalene, I'd like to know about what employers can do to deal with those employees who do not want to get vaccinated. I mean, as you've mentioned, it's quite a tricky situation right now. So, what can be done? Are they obliged to take any action against the employees?
Um, Look, I don't think that the issue of the action would come in if there is a resistance. What would be the legal prohibitors? And this is why I'm raising the various sections of the Constitution. What would be the prohibitors? The prohibitors lie in the Bill of Rights. So, if, for example, you have a private hospital and um, the owner of the hospital, the shareholders, insist that all medical staff, including nurses and frontline or whatever, is vaccinated. And someone decides that I don't want to be vaccinated. Well, then there would have to be that line that is clarified in terms of, um, because this is now currently a global issue where there's meant to even be a global COVID passport, which really is a huge infringement because there's so many other mutations of the virus. It's no longer just called COVID.
Mm-hmm.
There are so for me, I think that if a person then has to say, if you're forced, then that's where a person would need to have legal representation. What are the responsibilities if I'm working in a back office doing administration? um, with patients, then I wouldn't see the need for that person to be forced or compelled um, into to being vaccinated. The rationale that the employer must provide for forcing vaccinations onto their employees, or the country for that matter onto its citizens, that's the bigger question. That must be the one that is a prerogative. These vaccines that are being received by the government from the Serum Institute or wherever else they are receiving them, are these for individuals who want to be vaccinated, or is it for people who are going to be forced to be vaccinated? Now, that is the question.
All right, Magdalena, we're going to leave it there for now so that we can get some more clarity on this issue, whether it will form part of our constitution or not. But shukran so much for your time once again.
Oh, Shukran, it's a pleasure. Yes, I think the constitutional issue that lies at the center is what must be resolved. And that is something that we are investigating at the moment to consider the constitutionality. And that would be ideally um, the supreme law that has to be followed in this instance.
All right, we'll catch up with you once again once the law, well, if it does get to that, if it's constitutionalized. But for now, take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Shukar.
That was Magdalene Moonsamy, a lawyer and attorney, taking us through this whole issue of employers forcing their employees to take the COVID vaccine. And it is kind of a tricky situation, and employers cannot force the employees to take the COVID vaccine. So, just in case you are faced with such a situation, you can put your foot down, your feet down, and say, I'm not taking it. But it's all up to you. Right, so you can leave your comments in the comments section or you can send them to us on WhatsApp. The number is 061 766 0355. Just stay with us. We'll be right back.